Australia announces inquiry into asylum child detainees. The inquiry would focus on the well-being, health and development of the detained children, AHRC President Professor Gillian Triggs said. More than 1,000 children are currently in Australia's immigration detention facilities, the AHRC said. This included more than 100 in Nauru, the offshore centre condemned by the UN and rights groups for poor conditions. These are children that, among other things, have been denied freedom of movement, many of whom are spending important developmental years of their lives living behind wire, in highly stressful environments, Prof. Triggs said in a statement. The Commission's first report on the subject in 2004 found that mandatory detention of children of asylum seekers was inconsistent with Australia's human rights obligations, and that long-term detention placed children at high risk of serious mental harm. In an interview with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Prof. Triggs highlighted a lack of cooperation from the Immigration Department. I think I'd have to say over the last few months, we've had minimal cooperation in relation to the kinds of details that I need to know, particularly mental health, self-harm, and the processes for those that are transferred, she said. In particular, we'd like to understand more about the mental health of these children. The instances of self-harm, how they're being treated when they're manifesting conditions of extreme anxiety. Prof. Triggs said, the HRC did not oppose detention for an appropriate period to establish the identity and health of a child. However, we are concerned that when the time moves beyond 3 to 4 months, to 6, to 12, to 15 months, the likelihood is that we will be finding that there are breaches of international law. Chaotic mess. Immigration Minister Scott Morrison said officials would cooperate with the inquiry. But the reason there are children in detention is because over 50,000 turned up on illegal boats on Labour's watch, so we're dealing with Labour's chaotic mess here, he told local radio. Those who arrive in Australia by boat to seek asylum are placed in mandatory immigration detention. The number of boat arrivals rose sharply in 2012 and the first half of 2013. In response, Australia reopened offshore processing camps in Nauru, a tiny Pacific island, and in Papua New Guinea. The previous Labour government also introduced the deterrent PNG solution, an agreement whereby those found to be refugees would be settled in PNG, not Australia. Under the new Liberal National Coalition government, Operation Sovereign Borders, putting the military in charge of anti-people smuggling efforts, has been introduced. Reports suggest Australia has been turning asylum boats back to Indonesia, and in January, Australia apologized for inadvertently violating Indonesia's territorial waters on multiple occasions. The government is strictly controlling the release of information around its asylum policy, prompting critics to accuse it of excessive secrecy. The government says it has drastically cut the number of boats arriving in Australia. Rights groups and agencies, meanwhile, continue to criticize conditions in Australia's offshore processing centres, and to question whether its current asylum strategy violates its international obligations. The inquiry could be concluded before the end of the year, Prof. Triggs said.